Margo, Rotary member. I'm here to introduce our speaker, who happens to be my husband, Mark Thorsheim. And when Mark decided, well, he's been on the Board of Career Resources for a while and been incredibly impressed with the team. And he also was thinking, okay, I love career resources, I love cycling. I've got to find a way to marry these two together, and he decided to do a fundraiser for CRI and embarked on his midlife, his journey. And so he decided to ride his bike all the way from Norwalk, Connecticut to Astoria, Oregon. And it took him 62 days, and he raised $140,000 for career resources. So very proud of him, and just wanted to introduce him. He's going to just give you a quick rundown of the trip and the impetus for it and how he managed to get through it. So.
And so I'm mindful of time, just to watch the time, so I should finish by about
1:30.
1:30,
Yeah,
including Q&A. Okay.
No later than 1:30.
Yeah, no later than,
Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you so much for having me here. It's great that Jack was able to attend. I'm going to touch on Lucy in a moment. And Winchell was there for me every day of the trip, constantly keeping me focused, on task, whether it was fundraising. We did a blog, and which was really fun to be writing throughout the course of this journey. And Winchell, I tell everybody that I'm a big coffee guy, espresso in particular. I hit lots and lots of coffee shops along the way, and the texting back and forth with Winchell, I was like the crazy guy sitting in the corner at the coffee shop laughing, reading my texts every day. So thank you so much for being here. She's going to help run the slides for me. So you heard a little bit about CRI already from Winchell and Jack. I joined the board 4 years ago. Jim Lisher, whom many of you know, recruited me. We're St. Mark's buddies. He thought the mission would really speak to me, and he was spot on. And so when I flip to the next slide, we serve the entire state of Connecticut. So that's the only place that CRI operates. We're dedicated to the state of Connecticut, and the state itself is a major partner with CRI. Because of the halfway houses we run, other job skills, workforce development programs that are so critical to the state of Connecticut. Combating recidivism is really solved by solving joblessness. And Jack used the word dignity. That's in CRI's tagline, really. So, making workers, with dignity is so critical. And so when you look at the inmates that are released that don't go into programs like CRI, the recidivism is shockingly high, as you can see, in some cases, over 50%. 60%. With CRI, the clients that are part of the CRI programs, recidivism is less than 5%. So a real key to finding them, jobs, because again, they come out of prison and it's terribly undignified, way of life. So when I joined, it was the pandemic, right? We were mired in the pandemic. And one of the first projects I got tasked with was helping acquire a building in Bridgeport. And the spirit of the program really came from Lucy and a few of the CRI team members who knew that this would be a really innovative program to be able to have a place to house women and reunite them with their children as they're released and moving through workforce programs and sort of making their way into the world. Lucy, for those who don't know her, for those that do, can appreciate this. She was a force. Lucy just had this can-do attitude, and I'll never forget, we were collecting on some Zoom meeting in the pandemic, and she would just look us all on the screen and say, guys, we just got to get this done. And we did, and then we just knuckled down and found a way to raise the money, got the building refurbished in time to be able to open in 2021. Sadly, we lost Lucy. She was, as a board member, just beloved amongst the people of CRI. So it's fun to have her spirit around, and it also really gave me a lot of the conviction that I had around working with CRI and doing something like this bike ride, because it takes a lot of conviction to hop on a bike and ride across the country.
Yeah.
So the inspiration. I lost my brother in 2021, sadly, unexpectedly. He had a heart attack, and so Chris and I were always talked about doing something like this, doing a cross-country bike trip. We thought it'd be a really fun thing to do at some point in our lives. And so combining this trip, really fueled by Chris and his spirit, he had a real carpe diem, kind of attitude. That was, something that helped power me through this whole journey. I actually brought with me the bike helmet that I wore. This was Chris's bike helmet that I wore on the trip. So as I joke with people, as a big brother, he was always in my head, but now he's going to be on my head and protecting me. And there's a story around that too. So go to the next slide. So the route, I started in Cow Pasture Beach, and what anybody who rides across country, the big theme is you dip your back wheel in the Atlantic and front wheel in the Pacific, where I touched down in Oregon and Astoria. So this is roughly the route that I followed. I'm originally from Minnesota. I followed almost identically the route that we took every summer. I grew up in New Jersey, but we relocated to New Jersey when I was a kid. So every summer we drive back to Minnesota. So I kind of recreated that route in many ways. It was a little bit of a life journey for me, and then across the Upper Midwest to Oregon. You can flip to the next slide. So logistics. There is a group called the American, the Adventure Cycling Association, the ACA. It's headquartered in Missoula, Montana. My dad had lived in Missoula for over 20 years, so I was familiar with it. And they are the ones who construct bike routes all over the country. They're cross-country bike routes, every different direction. And they've done incredible research. So literally, you can see on the left there, those are the maps that I used. And so I had old school paper maps that fold out, which is really fun. Of course, digital maps that I used on my bike computer. The significance of the routes, though, are that the northern tier in particular is the oldest of the routes, sort of the granddaddy of bike routes. That was started over, I guess now getting on 50 years. They created what was called the Bike Centennial back in 1976 for the 200th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration. They put together a cross-country bike trip, with this bike route, the northern tier, and from there it's just built up over the years. The other significant leg of the trip that I took was the Lewis and Clark route. So once I got off the northern tier, which is in the upper Midwest, I jumped on the Lewis and Clark route that started in eastern Montana, and it followed, almost identically the route that the expedition took, which was fascinating. I was always fascinated by the expedition, and to be able to follow it so closely was great. The benefit of that too, by the way, is They knew what they were doing. Sacagawea in particular knew what she was doing. She had them taking routes that followed rivers. So not only was it beautiful, but I was able to avoid the worst of the mountain passes. So the peak elevation I ever got to was about 7,500, 8,000 feet. But it was just so fun to along the way, I probably saw, 30 or 40 different Lewis and Clark markers, points of interest, and it's just, spectacularly beautiful. I love this picture. Winding road, next 99 miles, that's in Idaho, Route 12. How often do you see that? One of the characters I met along the way was when I crossed, I was on the Continental Divide at this point, and this gentleman, he goes by the name Ginger Pony, that's how he introduced himself. Anyone doing the Appalachian Trail or hiking the Continental Divide, they often are given names by people they meet, and so someone named him Ginger Pony, and I just loved. I met him right after, literally going through a cattle drive right here. Right? So this was like city slickers in Montana. It was just bizarre. It was early morning, very early morning. It was about 6 a.m. And I ran right into the face of this cattle drive, and then subsequent to that, Ginger Pony. But that was one of the more dramatic moments. Here's a picture towards the end that I just loved. I got brilliant pictures all along the way, but this was in Washington on my way to Walla Walla. There were dramatic points, start to finish. So Winchell, who's a rock star when it comes to being the director of marketing and communications for CRI, we had a big group of people there for launch day at Cow Pasture Beach, including News 12. And in my overzealousness, I had what they call tubeless tires, which they don't have old-fashioned tubes, but what they have is a sealant inside the tire that prevents, if you get little holes poked into the tire, it automatically seals it back up for you. That's the good news. The bad news is if you over pump the tire, it can blow the tire off the rim. I was so hyped up at the beginning of that day for launch day, I over pumped the tire, and just as News 12, I'm getting interviewed, and just as I'm about to leave, and we're going to do this video shot of me, the tire blows off the back wheel. And it's not a small sound. It's a jarring sound, and it sprays sealant everywhere. So I had sealant all over me. I thought, this is just ridiculous. But I think the beauty to it was I had different tires on the bike before, like a week before. I decided to change them last minute. And it was a good thing because the tires that I originally took off were much better equipped for many of the more rugged road than I expected to, find along the way. I wasn't on paved roads and highways all the time. I was on literally gravel paths, dirt paths, and other places where the tires that I should have had on there, were incredibly useful. At the very end, I went over 4,000 miles without any accidents whatsoever. And 8 miles to the finish, I had my one and only accident. 8 miles to go. I was riding into Astoria, and I wanted to get off the main road. It's sort of a busy road to the beach, and you go right through downtown Astoria. And it's a significant area because the Columbia River lets into the Pacific there, and so it's a big touristy area, and there was this beautiful hiking and biking path that I was able to hop onto. The unfortunate part is it became a hiking, biking, and trolley path for people to go up and down the waterfront. My tire got stuck in a trolley track through me, still connected to the bike. It was still clipped in. Landed, went flying, landed on my side, twisted my ankle, hit my hip, hit my elbow. I still have a nice little scar on my elbow. Tore up my hand and then hit my head. And so the helmet is truly what, always saves you in these instances. So Chris, at the end of the day, came through.
You had to go 8 more miles after that?
8 more miles, and I was cooked at that point. I really was. I think what had happened is I found that your mind leads your body, and I was so mentally strong throughout the whole trip. About 4 days before the end, Margo was on the phone with me, and she said, "You must be ready to be done," because we could see the finish line. I could sort of the horse could smell the barn, as they say, and I was like, yeah. And my body for the first time started to hurt a little bit, and I just started to get impatient, and so that's really at the end of the day what caused me to crash was being probably a little bit too impatient and not taking my time, and so sure enough that led to a little excitement towards the end, but it felt good to jump into the Pacific Ocean and clean off. Here are just a variety of pictures. I've visited over 50 friends and family, so that was one of the other benefits to architecting the trip on my own. A lot of people were very concerned about me going solo. And I thought going solo would be the best way to do this. I loved the solitude, for starters. Margo kept joking that I was going to get jumped, on my trip, but a lot of sketchy farm animals out there. Watch out about all these cornfields and farms that you're riding through. But I found it to be just an incredible, once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to go whatever direction I wanted to go, to visit the people that I wanted to visit. I knew Chris was always with me, which was a real benefit. And at the end of the day, it's actually in many ways safer to be by yourself, because if any of you have ridden with groups, especially on the road, you start to pay attention to the other people and not pay attention to what your task is. And how to stay safe, doing it, and so that was a real, without a doubt, a real benefit for me. So I completed this in 61 days. Of the 61 days, I rode for 50 of those. So I averaged about 80 miles a day to accomplish this, and covered 15 states, which you saw on the map. Traveled over 4,100 miles, scaled over 125,000 feet, which was something, and everybody assumes that the biggest of the feats would be going through the mountains. Believe it or not, it was in the West. Believe it or not, it was Pennsylvania and Iowa. Those were the hardest places to cycle. Pennsylvania is just a roller coaster, especially the route that I took was a real roller coaster, and the heat at that point in the summer was worse when I was in Pennsylvania than certainly when you got out west. It became just beautiful, and oftentimes in the mornings it would be as low as 45, 50 degrees. Getting up in the mountains, and so it just absolutely, refreshing to be out there. I would ride very early in the day. I would start my day. I would wake up with adrenaline, just about every day at about 4 a.m. and force myself to stay in bed till about 5 a.m. and then get up, and I was on the road by 6. And riding in those hours of the day, you really avoid the worst of the heat. And so I would finish up, typically around 3 o'clock. Some days got later if I, stopped places along the way. But I just found it was an opportunity then in the late afternoon, early evening to explore wherever I was, at that point. So I mentioned I got to visit over 50 friends and family and over 50 unique coffee shops, which I certainly take as as a sort of a mark of success. And then we're almost up to about $140,000 for CRI in terms of fundraising, using these funds to support the team with unrestricted funds. As many of you know, so many of you work around the nonprofit world. It's so hard to find those unrestricted funds in particular. And this to me was just a way to give back to CRI, and in Lucy's spirit, just get her done. And so we're continuing to fundraise under this project and many others, for CRI. We'd love to hit the next slide, and and then just give you one more plug there around. You can visit my website, which is thortour.org. And so you'll see my blog there. I took lots of pictures, posted pictures every day with Winchell, and wrote a little bit of something. I think, I found, as I was talking with Scott before this event, I think I had to rely on my faith a lot to get through this, because as I said before, you have to sort of, your mind leads your body. And it took a lot of faith to know that, every day I got to get up and keep going. My philosophy was one day at a time. It's philosophy kind of at CRI for many of our clients and other people, facing challenges. It's just get up and one day at a time. And you then stop worrying about, what's going to happen at this point in time or at this particular juncture, along my trip. I could sit there and worry about the mountains or worry about other things. Instead, I just focused on one day at a time. I created lots of opportunities along the way. Every day had something to sort of look forward to. And, I think that really, really served me well. Thank you.
Wow.
Yes.
One, where did you sleep?
Yeah.
Second, how did you get home?
Yeah, good question. I did not ride home. I did not ride home. I flew home.
Did you leave your bike with some?
So there's lots of different bike shops have ways to get bikes home. So they'll ship the bike home for you. But it was a funny question, because as I was going across the country, everybody that I ran into would ask me, are you going to turn around and ride home? I'm like, no way, not a chance. I won't be able to do that. And then as far as sleeping was concerned, I'm way too soft to camp, completely way too soft to camp, which is, believe it or not, over 90% of the people that I met doing this, either going the same direction as me, or I met, good grief, I met dozens and dozens of riders going west to east while I was going east to west. They all were camping, no matter the age. College kids, I met couples in their 70s. So a lot of the Europeans, I think they're just comfortable with the sort of that form of staying at youth hostels or hostels and camping. I stayed at hotels, I stayed at bed and breakfast. I stayed with friends and family along the way. The most interesting place I stayed was a Benedictine monastery in North Dakota, which was so cool. It was definitely, one of the highlights of the trip, where I met another rider that was going east, and that was the beauty. Someone had told me, make sure you stop and talk to every rider, that you cross along the way. Because you'll get information and you'll hear something that may be useful. And this guy Eric who I've befriended and kept up in touch with, he said, "Hey, there's this monastery. They host hikers and bikers, and it is to say the middle of nowhere is an exaggeration. It doesn't even begin to describe it. It was the middle of nowhere. It sat up on a bluff in North Dakota." Just this spectacular setting. It's this gorgeous Catholic church, and it's called the Assumption Abbey, that is located near Medora, North Dakota. And I got in touch with Brother Odo, who was the brother in charge of arranging visitors, and he invited me. Said if I get there, by 5 o'clock, 5:30, join them for dinner, which I did, which was just so cool. So it was probably about 40 brothers that I all sat down, had dinner with. They were all super interested in my adventure. They had not had, many bikers through there last summer, and so it was just a wonderful way to experience a whole different slice of life. Incredibly warm and comforting. And the funny part was, I'm thinking, I'm going to a monastery. It's a bunch of brothers. They probably don't eat a lot of food. I'm thinking they're very, for obvious reasons, they forego many things and serve, serve one. But they sat me down and said, eat as much as you want. We know these bikers and hikers that come through here. They're super hungry. I go in, there was a massive spread. and in perfect...
And good wine.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, they do make wine. That is one of the funny things that I learned as well. But in good Midwest fashion, for dessert, they had 2 different Jell-O desserts. I grew up on Jell-O from a Minnesota mom, so...
So Mark, you talk about food. Could you tell us a little bit about when you ate and what you ate? I mean, you
Yeah.
obviously get a routine of
Yeah.
meal times and what do cross-country bikers eat to keep going?
Yeah, it's funny. There are
And
people,
drink, I suppose. Yeah.
there are people who cyclists and marathon runners, triathletes, all those folks. That are very scientific about this, and they know they've got to pack on a certain number of calories, and they measure and stay attuned. I got good advice. Again, I talked to a lot of people before my, before I departed that had done this before, and the best advice I was given was eat every 2 hours. Just make sure you have something and eat every 2 hours. And so I would always have fruit and power bars and other things, and the way the adventure cycling routes are architected, they have you on roads going through towns periodically, and every 25 miles or so you're going to find something. And so that was not, food was never an issue. There were a couple days where I had to pack, sort of extra meals with me the night before, because I knew that I might get caught up a little bit and not have as much food if I didn't run into a restaurant. A lot of times in the middle of nowhere, restaurants just aren't open for whatever reason. I was in some incredibly rural places, and so I found myself packing lunches. But the key, as everyone I think knows, is eat lots of protein, and I could eat. I mean, when I would finish up in the day, I would eat a box of donuts. I'd go get a shake, a chocolate shake. I would eat, two entrees and 3 appetizers. But didn't gain a pound. Obviously, in fact, lost a few.
What do you drink?
So
On the road?
water mostly. I would drink some electrolytes as it got hot on certain days. I was careful about making sure that I would replenish, but water was absolutely the most refreshing thing. Tom?
Did you hit any foul weather, dangerous weather?
So, shockingly, of the 50 full riding days that I had, I only hit rain on 3 of those days. There was some rain on some of the off days. I had one of my off days was spent in Ohio, sidelined because of Hurricane Beryl that came through the middle of the country last summer. You may recall that. that storm. It's my aunt's name, which I thought was funny. As I was on my way to Minnesota, Hurricane Beryl. But even with the rain that I encountered, it was no big deal at all. As long as you have a good rain jacket, as a biker, you stay completely warm. Cycling, it's really not dangerous to ride in the wet unless you're scaling up and down. So I was very lucky in that regard. The heat was worse believe it or not, in June, at the end of June, than it was in July. I left June 25th and finished August 24th. The heat seemed to kind of tail off a bit, so I got lucky, I think, this summer. And it was an incredibly arid summer in the parts of the country I was. Where was I? I guess at this point in Washington or Oregon when that big storm hit here that caused 11, 12 inches of rain in Connecticut all in one shot. I didn't have 11 or 12 inches of rain collectively my entire trip, which was shocking.
So the flip side of that would be forest fires, which are big out there.
Yes.
Did you have to score for that? Any of those?
Yeah, so again, super lucky. Maybe God was watching over, but I found that every time a fire cropped up, I just got lucky. When I got to Montana, there had been some smoke the week before I got there, cleared up once I got there. Same thing in parts of Washington and Oregon. But it wasn't quite as bad a summer in terms of forest fires and smoke as it had been the prior summer. So I was really, really, fortunate in that regard. Yes.
How did the tires do?
Yeah. So the only thing I did worry about was the mechanical aspect of my trip, because I could be in the middle of nowhere and something would go wrong with my bike, and I had one legit blown tire where my tire just got absolutely shredded by some piece of metal and blew off, but it happened right sort of at an off ramp in Oregon, and I was able to Uber to a bike shop 15 miles away, and then because I would have never been able to repair this tire, it had to be replaced completely. That was at the very end of the trip, and then along the way I did replace tires just for different reasons. When I went through the mountains, I did go down to a more proper kind of road tire, the one that blew off the back of the tire, back of the wheel at the beginning of the ride, and so I did go back to more slick type tires to get through the mountains because it would be easier to scale. But I was really, really lucky. There are these things called goat heads, which are little prickers that go into tires in Oregon and Washington State in particular. And I got these, it's basically a weed that grows everywhere, and the tops of the weed break off, blow all over the place. You can't even see them. And they're little prickers that go right into your tire, and they just keep accumulating. Eventually you have to replace the tire. I did that once, but otherwise, shockingly lucky. Yes, Tom?
Was it at all monotonous? You're on the bike.
Yeah.
I don't know whether you're listening to a podcast or something on the way.
Yeah.
Did you get a little monotonous?
Yeah, Margo was like, I can't believe you're going to do this. You're going to be so bored. I was not bored ever. I mean, it was just unbelievable. I would have a routine, and I was sharing with, this is how we started talking about faith with Scott. I'd have a routine where every morning I'd start and I'd pray while I'm riding. And I'd just spend a half an hour thinking about all the things I'm grateful for, people I'm concerned about, and so that occupied my mind. I did use one earbud in my right ear when I knew I was safe. I wouldn't do it on the left side because the cars and trucks are coming up on my left side, but I could pop in a earbud, I listen to lots of podcasts, music, that entertained me. But I tell you, there was just always something going on, and you think once you've seen one cornfield, you've seen them all. It's not true. It's really not true. You just get so fascinated by the littlest of things, And I think that's the simplicity and the beauty of trips like this, where you can quietly explore different parts of the country. You're not in a car, you're not on a highway. You know, I was off on beautiful county roads, you know, through the central Pennsylvania. I was running into Amish community after Amish community. So I would, you know, be waving at, you know, these really sweet, you know, Amish people with their horse and buggies coming from church or some event. Yes, Margo?
What's the next big adventure?
Yeah, yeah, that's code for Margo wants to get rid of me. This is a great way to get rid of me for 2 months. I would like to do something like this in Europe for sure, because Europe is more bike friendly. I think that's even though the ACA builds these beautiful maps and has these designated routes, many of which do have bike paths. And I mean, I was on paved bike paths in Iowa, going from little farm town to little farm town with canopied trees, you know, in certain places. But that was only about 10% of the 4,100 miles, maybe 15% of the 4,100 miles that I rode. And Europe's a lot more friendly, you know, in terms of having, you know, being bike friendly. Oh yeah.
Mark,
Leo.
great story. How many, two-part question, how many wrong turns did you make, and what was the furthest you got off course?
It's a great question. Great question, Leo. I couldn't believe I got lost once. That's it. I mean, there might have been days where I, you know, went half a mile or mile wrong direction, but figured it out quickly. One morning, I got up in eastern Montana. I was going onto a new map I was going onto the Lewis and Clark route, and you can take the northwest route or the southwest route. And I thought I was on the southwest route. I was on the northwest route. It took me 50 miles out of my, or 40 miles out of my way. I rode 50 miles without looking at my bike computer or my paper map, because I just thought I knew what I was doing. And I had a little bit of a tailwind. I was flying. I was going about, I averaged about 15 miles an hour across the course of the trip. I was going 18, 20 miles an hour the whole way, flying, and sort of woke up and realized I was, I'd ridden 50 miles in about 3 hours, and I needed to go back 40 miles. I had to go back on 30 miles of that was actually gravel. Hard gravel, difficult gravel in the heat of the afternoon, and that was one of the super hot days that got up to close to 100. I was saved though. I called ahead to the hotel that I was heading to, and young guy behind the desk took my call. He's like, I can't come get you, but let me see what I can do. This guy Benjamin, he went and Googled me, found out what I was doing. I was doing this big fundraiser. He's like, I gotta help this guy. He called the county police and texted me, and he said, Sheriff Gray Eagle is gonna meet you at the bottom of this ramp by the highway. And so he took me, because I was gassed at that point. I'd ridden like 120 miles, which felt like about 220. And so this sheriff picked me up, and he was a military, a member of the military. Originally had been over and done 2 tours in Afghanistan, and so he joked with me. He was like one of the early tours there, and he joked with me. He said we lot worse rescue situations in Afghanistan than some idiot riding his bike in Montana. So, Gene, one more question, Gene.
Well, you definitely have a book in you.
Seriously, Yeah. Well, it was fun to write, and as many of you know, to write is maybe a lost form these days, right? And to sit down and every day think about the experiences I had, the people I met, and memorialize that, was just something that I'll never forget, and I've got it now, documented in this in this blog.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you. Very inspiring.